All right, this is the entry-level driver training vehicle inspection. It's not the same inspection that you're doing for the Modernized Skills testing. This is for the training, which is above and beyond that other testing. So we've decided to adopt a checklist as well for the entry-level driver training inspection. So to get started, I've got my checklist, so I'm just going to go right on down the list and go from there. So I'm going to start with the in-vehicle area. I'm going to start by checking my safety belt, make sure that it's not cut, frayed, or torn, or damaged. It connects and it latches, stays properly, disconnects easily. All right, so that's working properly. And then safe start. So I'm just going to go right down the list and check all those items. For the safe start, I want to check all my mirrors, make sure that nobody's leaning up against the vehicle or underneath or anything like that. I'm going to push in the clutch and have my foot covering the brake. I'm not applying any brakes because my parking brake is set, so I want to make sure that that is set and that the vehicle is in neutral. I'm going to turn the key to the on position. When I do, I'm going to check my ABS warning lights, make sure that they all come on and then shut off, which they just shut off, so that's working good. Again, checking the mirrors, then perform a safe start. Turn that. The first thing I want to check is my oil pressure. It's rising to the normal operating range, so it's about 45 psi. So that's good. If my oil pressure was too low, I would want to shut the vehicle off. So I want to double check that I'm in neutral, double check that my parking brake is set, then I can slowly take my foot off the clutch, and then I can take my foot away from the brake. So that's a safe start. I'm going to go into my parking brake, trailer brake, and service brake checks next. So for the parking brake, I've got plenty of air. Just going to put that in a low gear. I'm going to set my parking brake, release my trailer, and then I'm going to go ahead and take my foot off the brake so that I'm not using my foot to test that, and slowly let the foot off the clutch, pull against that. It's a little bit too hard, but that stopped the vehicle. Now I'm going to go ahead, and the parking brake is working properly. I'm going to set my trailer brake, release my parking brake, and do the same thing. Just there we go. Just a light tug against there to make sure that that's holding. All right, and then next I'm going to check my service brake, which I'll push in and release both of my parking and trailer brakes. And then I will pull forward about 5 miles per hour, and then I'm going to apply the brake pedal. So that's the service brake. Make sure the vehicle comes to a stop nice and smoothly. Everything feels like it's working and operating correctly. And I'm also going to lightly hold the steering wheel, make sure the vehicle doesn't pull to the right or the left. So I'm going to get up to about 5 miles an hour. So there we go. So clutch in, apply the foot brake. Vehicle came to a stop and didn't pull to the right or the left. So that appears to be working properly. Air brake test. So for the air brake test, since I'm on a slope and I don't want to chalk the wheels while I'm building the air up, I'm just going to set my parking brake and leave my trailer brake released and build up the air and then go from there. The first step is the governor cutout test. I want to check. I'm going to raise the RPM and build the air pressure until the governor cuts out. The governor should cut out between 120 and 140 psi. So it's important that you check and see when the needles stop moving. That would be the governor, cutting out. Or in most vehicles, you'll hear a sneeze or a psh sound, and then that's also the governor cutting out. This truck is not equipped with an air dryer, so it doesn't make that noise. The needles stopped moving at about 125 psi, so that's right in range between 120 and 140, and the governor cut out is working properly. So that's the first step. The second step is to check our air rate loss. So I'm going to put the vehicle in a low gear and then release the parking brake and make sure that the trailer brake is pushed in. I'm going to turn the engine off, and then I can take my foot off the clutch and turn the key back to the on position. All right, so my parking and trailer brakes are released. I'm going to fully apply the service brake, and then I'm going to check that when the needles stop moving, we're right at 100 psi. The needles have settled there. So I'm going to watch that for 1 minute and make sure that I lose no more than 4 psi in 1 minute. And let me find my stopwatch here. I'll start that minute now. I'm at 100 psi. So it's important that you say what the pressure is at the beginning of the minute and then hold that for 1 minute. Again, I've got my service brake fully applied, and brakes are released, engine off, and key is in the on position. And I can lose no more than 4 psi in 1 minute. Now, while we're waiting for that, when you want to wait that full minute, if you make any mistakes on the air brake test, start over. Build the air pressure all the way up to governor cutout, and then, start through all the steps over again. Things that could happen: you may forget to turn the key on, you may forget to release the parking brakes. So if any of those things happen, again, stop and start all the way over. Okay, that's 1 minute there, and I'm still at 100 psi, so I haven't lost any air pressure, and that's great. Again, I can lose no more than 4 psi in 1 minute. So I'll put that away. The next test is to see when the low air warning light and buzzer comes on. It needs to come on above 55 psi. So what I'm going to do is pump the brake, release the pressure, and I'm watching the gauges to see when the warning light and buzzer comes on. So they just came on. It's 65 psi when the lights turned on and the buzzer sounded. So that's above 55, and that's operating correctly. Next, I'm going to check out the pop-out test. So I'm going to see when these valves pop out. They should pop out between 20 and 45 psi. Again, I'm going to pump down the air brakes, removing the air from the system, and I'm going to watch these valves and see when they pop out, because sometimes they don't pop out at the same time. So when one of them or both of them pop out, I'm going to stop and say what that air pressure is. So again, I'm watching the valves and not the gauge. Okay, so they both popped out, and I'm checking the gauges now. We're at 30 psi. So that operated correctly. That's between 20 and 45. So my air brake check was successful. Everything is operating correctly. All right, so next we've got lighting indicators. So I'm going to go ahead and start the engine and build the air pressure while I do inspect the rest of these. So again, safe start. Check the vehicle's in neutral. Parking brake is set. Nobody is around me or under the vehicle. Foot covering the brake. Start the vehicle. Watch my oil pressure is rising. That's good. Double checking neutral. Double checking parking brake. Slowly take my foot off the clutch, and then I can take my foot away from the brake. Okay. So again, I want to check my indicator lights. So I'm going to check my dash lights. So my left turn indicator comes on and goes off when I turn the switch on and off. My right turn indicator, my hazard lights or four-way flashers are coming on and going off as I turn those. I'm going to turn on my headlights and check my high beam indicator. It comes on and then goes off when I cycle the switch. And we also check the ABS warning lights, that they come on and go off earlier. Okay, so next I'm going to inspect the gauges. So I'm going to start here with my water gauge. I'm going to check to make sure that the water gauge rises to the normal operating range. For most vehicles, that's right around 180 degrees. The temperature is cold on this vehicle, so it's down low, but I'm going to watch that and make sure that it rises to that normal operating range as it should. Down below that is my oil pressure gauge. I want to check to make sure that my oil pressure is at the normal operating range. At idle, we're right at 40 psi, so that's a good and normal operating range for this vehicle. I want to check my RPM gauge. I can raise and lower the RPM, and then that's working properly. I can check my speedometer and make sure that, you know, when we did our service brake check, I was watching that, and that showed that it was rising when we were pulling forward, so that was working properly. Check my fuel gauge, make sure that it has enough fuel, and yeah, at least get me through the day, or at least get me through or get me to a fuel stop or somewhere where I can fill up. I've got my voltmeter down below that. I want to check and make sure that the voltage is reading at the proper level. It should be between 12 and 14.5 volts. We're sitting right above 14, so that's operating correctly. And then I'm going to check my air gauges. I have my primary and secondary air gauges. I want to make sure that they are rising to the normal operating and cutout range. Again, we did check that earlier, and it cut out at 125, which is between right where it should be. And then I want to inspect all my gauges, make sure they're not cracked or damaged. There's no broken or missing glass. The needles are not bent, cracked, damaged, or warped or anything. And I can read all the numbers and, you know, all the information that is on there. So my gauges are working properly. So next on the list, we've got emergency equipment. So I'm going to check my spare fuses. I have some here. I want to make sure that I have the proper size and type fuses for this vehicle, and that I have plenty of extras, and that they are clean, not cracked or damaged, and they're in usable condition. I want to check I've got 3 reflective triangles, red reflective triangles behind here. I need to check to make sure that I have at least 3. They're not cracked, damaged, and they are in usable condition, and they're clean. Underneath my seat, I have a fire extinguisher, so I'd want to check that, make sure that it's properly mounted, it's the right type of extinguisher, and it's properly charged, and not missing any safety items, such as the locking pin that keeps it from accidentally discharging. Right. So then, I've got windshield and traffic monitoring devices. So my windshield, I'm going to inspect the entire windshield, make sure that it's not cracked, it's not damaged, there's no illegally placed stickers, that it's clean on the inside and outside. And then I want to check the weather strip or the weather seal around there, make sure it has a good seal and there's no water dripping and leaking on the inside. And then traffic monitoring devices, I've got mirrors, so I've got my side mirrors here and then my spot mirrors on the front. I want to check and make sure that the mirrors are not cracked or damaged. They're secure, they're clean, no illegally placed stickers, and they're properly adjusted for me as the driver. Same thing for the spot mirrors, properly mounted and you know, adjusted for me, clean, and no damage. All right. So next we have wipers and washers. So I'm going to check the windshield wipers. The wipers, I'm checking to make sure they're securely mounted. There's no cracks or damage on any parts of the wiper blades and assembly. I want to check the blades themselves, make sure they're not separating from the rest of the wiper. I want to make sure that it has good tension against the windshield. And then I want to make sure that they operate correctly. They're cleaning the windows, not just smearing. And then I also want to make sure that the sprayer is working, so the washer fluid is spraying out as it should. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate that. So the washer is working fine, it's cleaning the windows, and they appear to be operating as they should be. So wipers, washers are good. And then we've got the heater and defroster. So the heater and defroster, I want to check that and make sure that the fan's blowing. I want to turn this to hot and then defrost, so I've got defrost and heater, so I can check them both. Checking up here, making sure that that's blowing, I can feel that. And then down here, I can feel it blowing down here as well. So you want to check them individually. So you can either put that to defrost alone, and then over here to the different settings, and make sure that it's blowing here, the other places. So the heater and the defroster is working fine. All right, so next I want to check the horns. Oops, I'm going to turn that off because that's really hot. Check the horns. So here is the city horn. The city horn's working fine, and on these trucks the air horn is over here. The air horn is working fine, nice and loud, everything's good there. All right, so that's everything on the in-cab. So now I want to do an external light operations check. So I'll ask my helper here to help me out with that. So what I'd like you to do is go to the front right corner and check the front and the passenger side of the vehicle. And then when I ask you to go to the back, go to the driver's side and the rear and look at those lights, and I'll call out to you and let you know what I want you to check. All right?
All right.
Okay, left, right, four-way flashers. Okay, headlights, high beams. Okay, and then marker lights and clearance lights. Good. All right, you go ahead and go to the back. Okay, marker and clearance. Good. Okay, left, right, hazards. Okay, brakes. All right, good. Slow poke. Safely exit the vehicle using 3 points of contact. So now I'm going to start with the front of the vehicle. I'm going to look underneath the vehicle, make sure there's no leaks or puddling of any fluids or of any kind underneath the vehicle. Make sure that that is nice and clean underneath there. There's no hoses or wires or anything hanging down. And I also want to check to make sure that the vehicle is not leaning to the right or to the left, and that everything looks good there. That would be an indicator, if it were leaning, that it might have a bad tire or suspension issues. So let me turn off the headlights. Okay, so I'll start with the external lights and lenses. I want to check all the lenses on the front of the vehicle, make sure that they're not cracked or damaged. They're all properly mounted. They're all the proper color. and they're not fogged over or glazed over too much, and there's no water or any kind of condensation or anything inside the lenses. For the functions, I'm checking my clearance lights up top, my marker lights down low, my headlights, my high beams and low beams, and also my right and left turn indicators and four-way flashers. So next I'm going to check the fluid levels. Go ahead and open the hood here. Always open the hood from the front of the vehicle, pull this back, and then just slowly let this come down until it's resting on the supports. So I'm going to check the fluid levels in here. I want to start with the coolant. The coolant is here. I want to make sure that I'm checking it at the sight glass here, making sure that the level is between the add and max line, which it is, so that's good. Down here we have our power steering fluid. Again, it's got, you know, opaque container here so you can see the fluid levels inside. I want to make sure it's between the minimum and maximum. And then here is my engine oil dipstick. I want to check here by removing the dipstick, cleaning it off completely, fully reinserting it, pulling it back out, and checking to make sure that it is in at the right level between the minimum and the maximum, or the add and full lines. This is also the fill tube, so if I needed to add fluid, I could do that here. All right, so then we've got fluid and air leaks that we're checking for. So I'm going to check the entire, engine bay area here. I'm going to check the radiator, the engine, the transmission, the top and the bottom, everything that I can see, all the hoses and all of the electrical connections, everything, looking for any kind of leaking or seepage, as well as chafing or rubbing hoses, and also listening for air leaks, making sure there's no audible air leaks or anything there. So I don't hear anything and I'm not seeing any leaks, so that is good. Next I'm going to check the steering system. I'll start with the steering column that's here, make sure that it's properly attached, the universal joints are nice and lubricated well, not cracked or damaged, no loose missing parts. I've got the steering box here. The steering box, I want to make sure that it's connected to the frame securely, there's no missing or loose nuts or bolts, and that it's not leaking. And then I'm going to check the steering linkage. So we have our pitman arm, our drag link, upper control arm, lower control arm, and then the tie rod going across. So all the linkage parts, we're checking to make sure that none of the parts are bent, cracked, or damaged, not missing any castle nuts or cotter keys. The joints are properly connected and properly lubricated, and all connected, not damaged or missing. Okay, next we've got the alternator and water pump. So on this vehicle, it's on the other side. So the alternator is here. I'm checking to make sure that it is not cracked or damaged. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. I'm checking my electrical connections, making sure they're secure and snugly mounted, and no corrosion on the terminals. And this is also belt driven, so I'm gonna check the belt, make sure that it's not cracked, damaged, or torn, it's not frayed, and it's the proper thickness or width, so it's filling the pulley there. And also want to make sure that there's no more than 3/4 of an inch of play between the pulleys. Next we have the water pump, so that's down here. The water pump, we're checking to make sure that it's not cracked or damaged, no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and that there are no leaks. The water pump is also belt driven on this vehicle, and we just inspected that belt, so that's what we need to check for that. Okay, so going back to the other side, I'm going to check my air compressor, which is located here. So the air compressor is not cracked or damaged or leaking. It's securely mounted to the engine, no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and the air compressor is gear driven. So Now, connected to the air compressor is the power steering pump. So we would want to check that as well. So that's behind and down on that bottom side of the air compressor, just coming right out the back side of it. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. It's not cracked or damaged, and there's no leaking, and it's gear driven through the air compressor. And then we inspect the hoses here for the power steering as well, making sure that they're all connected, not cracked, damaged, or leaking. Okay, next we'll go to the suspension. This has got spring suspension, so I'm going to check my spring mount in the front and the back, making sure that they're not cracked or damaged. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, securely mounted to the frame, no illegal repair welds or anything there. Want to check the leaf springs, making sure that they are properly seated, they're not cracked, they're not damaged, and they're not scissoring, so they're stacked properly. And then they're also connected securely to the mounts, and the bushings are in good condition, and all the nuts and bolts connecting that are in good condition as well. Next, I want to check my U-bolts here. The U-bolts, I want to make sure that they are not cracked, damaged, or bent, other than how they're supposed to be, and securely mounted to the axle. On the bottom side, I want to check the nuts there, making sure that they are snug and not cracked, damaged, or missing. All right, and then we have the shock absorber. The shock absorber, I want to check the mounting on the top and the bottom, the mounts, make sure that they are properly attached to the axle and to the frame, making sure that there's no loose or missing nuts or bolts here. The bushings are in good condition on the top and the bottom of the shock absorber. The shock absorber casing is not dented or cracked, and there's no signs of any leakage. Okay, so next we'll check the brake system. For the brake system, I'll start here with the air hose, checking to make sure that it's connected on both ends. It's not cracked or damaged or bulging, and it's in good enough condition that it could supply air to the braking system. So no leaks. The hose is connected to the brake chamber. The brake chamber, we're checking to make sure that it's not cracked or damaged or dented anywhere. It's not leaking. It's securely mounted to this bracket, so no loose or missing nuts or bolts. It's got this clamp here, making sure that's in place and secure, not dented, cracked, or damaged as well. Next, we'll check the push rod. The push rod should be coming straight out of the brake chamber. It's not bent, cracked, or damaged, and it's connected to the slack adjuster with these pins and cotter keys, making sure that those are all free moving, not cracked, damaged, or missing. And we should also check to make sure there's no more than 1 inch of play in the push rod when we're pulling on that to check the slack. So the slack adjuster is securely mounted, it's not cracked or damaged, and it's properly lubricated. Then we're going down in here, we've got the brake drum and the linings. So we'll start with the drum. The drum, we're checking to make sure that it's not cracked or damaged or dented, it's not warped. There's no illegal repair welds. Want to check inside here, make sure that it's not pitted or grooved. Also want to make sure that it's not worn too thin. And we're checking for signs of looseness. Signs of overheating. Signs of overheating include bluing of the metal on the inside there, and also fractures or little stress cracks. Next, we want to check the brake linings. The linings, we're checking to make sure that these are not cracked or damaged. They're seated properly inside the drum. They are a minimum thickness of 1/4 inch. And then we also want to check and make sure that they're not cracking or anything and not separating from this metal backing plate, and that there's no loose or missing hardware or springs or anything that help hold that together. And then also inside here, we're checking for brake contaminants. So that includes oil or grease or any kind of debris or anything that can get inside here that could reduce the braking capabilities of the system. Okay, so next we're going to go to the tires. So the tires, we're checking for 3 things: the inflation, the condition, and the minimum tread depth. So I'm going to start with the condition. I'm checking with the sidewalls and the top, making sure that there's no chunks of rubber or tread missing, anything that would expose the plies of the tires. Want to check and make sure we have even tread wear. There's no cuts, bulges, abrasions anywhere on the tires, and also no foreign items like nails, screws, or anything else that could get stuck in the tires and cause a leak. Next, we'll check the minimum tread depth. We want to check all the major tread grooves using a tire gauge, a tread depth gauge, making sure that the minimum tread depth on the steer tires is 4/32 of an inch. So again, you would do that using a tread depth gauge. We also want to check and make sure that we do not have recaps or retreads on the steer tire. Next, we'll check the inflation. So we want to find the valve stem. It's down here. It's not bent, cracked, or damaged. It has a cap on it in place. We would use a tire air pressure gauge to check the pressure, and these tires should be at about 105 psi. So we want to make sure that that's inflated to the proper level. So next, we're going to check the rims. So I'm going to check around the bead of the rims, making sure that it's not dented, cracked, or damaged, and there's no leaking along the edges. And then all the rest of the rim, we're checking to make sure there's no cracks or dents or damage or illegal repair welds. We're also checking the bolt holes that these studs go through and making sure that they are not distorted or out of round. Next, I want to check the lug nuts. I want to make sure that all the lug nuts are present and that all the lug nuts are tight. They're not cracked or damaged and or split or I can't think of the word, out of the proper shape. I can't think of the word. Anyway, we also want to check and make sure that we're looking for signs of looseness, which include shiny threads or rust trails. So the rust trails happen when water gets down in between this ring and the lug nut and the rim there and creates rust. And then as you drive, centrifugal force causes a trail to form. So if you're seeing those, that's an indicator that they could be loose, as well as shiny threads on the studs, making sure if you're seeing that, that's a sign that the vehicle may have been worked on recently and they may or may not have tightened the studs down to the proper torque specifications. So we're also checking all the studs, making sure that they are not damaged. Next, we have our hub oil seal. We're checking to make sure that it is not cracked or damaged, there's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and that we don't have any leaks. We are at the proper level of our hub fluid. Okay, next we're going to the side of the vehicle. On the side of the vehicle, we're going to check the entire side of the truck and the trailer, looking at lenses and reflectors. So I want to check all the lenses and reflectors, again, on the truck and the trailer, making sure that they are not cracked or damaged, they're all securely mounted, not loose or missing, and they're clean, and they are all the proper color. Next, we're going to go to traffic monitoring devices. So here we'll check the mounting of our mirrors, making sure that they are securely fastened to the vehicle, the door here, not bent or damaged. We want to check the mirrors themselves, make sure that they're not flopping around, they're clean, and no illegally placed stickers, and they appear to be in good condition. Then I'm going to go over to the other side. We've got the battery. So the battery box is here. I want to check the box and the cover, making sure that they are in good condition, not cracked or damaged, and are preventing water and rain and snow and all that from getting on the batteries and protecting them as they should. Inside, the batteries should be securely mounted in there, not just in there loose. Want to make sure that the batteries are not bulging, cracked, or damaged. We want to check that the cables are securely fastened. There's no corrosion on the terminals, and then also the cables coming out of the battery box, we're checking to make sure that those are not cracked or damaged or shorting, and that there's no exposed wires or anything there, or damaged insulation. So that's the batteries. Alright, so next we'll go to the door. I want to check and make sure that the door opens and closes properly. It does. Make sure that it closes all the way, which that is. We want to check the hinges on the inside, making sure that they are not cracked or damaged. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and that the door is closing all the way. I also want to check the weather seal on the inside of the vehicle and make sure that that's in place, not damaged or missing. We've got the steps here. I want to check those. So we've got the steps there and the steps over here and the catwalk. We're checking all of those, making sure they're not cracked or damaged. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. And there's nothing on here that could cause you to slip or fall or trip, get your shoes hung up on there. Want to make sure there's nothing like ice or snow or oil or spilled diesel fuel or anything on there that could cause you to slip. And they're connected properly to the straps here for the fuel tank, and want to make sure that those connections are all good. Next, we'll check the fuel tank. It's securely mounted. Again, we're checking the straps, making sure it's got that rubber boot in between the strap and the tank so you don't have metal on metal rubbing. We're checking the entire tank for any kind of damage, cracks and leaks all the way around. We also want to inspect the fuel cap here, making sure that it's not leaking. It has a good rubber seal on the inside of that and a safety chain. And we also want to check our fuel lines going over to the engine, make sure that they are not leaking. All right. So next we've got the frame of the vehicles. So I'm going to check the entire frame of the tractor, making sure that it's not cracked or damaged or twisted. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts or anything that is attached to that. Also want to check the cross members, make sure that they're not bent, damaged, and not missing any nuts or bolts. Also want to make sure that the top flanges are not drilled or welded. So anything that's going to be, bolted through or drilled should be on the sides. All right. So going down the list, steps. All right, we've got our drive shaft. The drive shaft is in here. We're checking to make sure that it is not bent, cracked, or damaged or twisted. It's securely connected to the differential and the transmission, and that the universal joints in the system are connected properly, not loose, cracked, or damaged. It has a carrier bearing on this vehicle, so we want to inspect that and make sure that it is properly bolted to the cross member and in good condition, not cracked, damaged, or worn out. Then we have the exhaust system. So from here you can see the piping, the muffler, and the tailpipe over there. We want to check the entire exhaust system, make sure that it's not cracked, damaged, or leaking. It's securely mounted, nothing's rubbing up against it, and again, making sure it's not leaking. You can see signs of leaking, or if there are any cracks, you can see black soot collecting around those areas. So if you're seeing that, it's an indicator that it does have a leak there. Okay, next we've got our drive axle. So checking the suspension system here. So this is much like the front. So we've got springs, the spring mounts, leaf springs, and the U-bolts. We want to inspect those the same way as we inspected the steering suspension system. The difference here, we have a torque leaf or torque arm, whatever you want to call it. Want to make sure that that's in place, not cracked or damaged or bent. All the nuts and bolts are in good condition. The bushings are in good condition, so that's not all loose in there, and that appears to be operating and working correctly. Next, we'll check the braking system. So we've got the air hoses, the brake chamber, the push rod, the slack adjuster, the drums, and the linings are all the same as we inspected on the steering axle. All right, so then we've got our tires. On this drive axle, we have dualies. So we want to check and make sure that these are both the same type of tire. So both radials are bias ply, and then we also want to inspect the inflation, the condition, and the minimum tread depth the same way as we did that on the steering axle, except the minimum tread depth on these tires is a minimum tread depth of 2/32 of an inch. So next, we also want to make sure that they're both inflated to the same level using a tire pressure gauge. So in between here is called the bud spacing area. We want to make sure that there's no daylight gap between the rims, and also want to make sure that there's no rocks or bricks or wood or anything lodged in between the tires here. So that appears to be good. Okay, outside here, we're going to check the rims, the lug nuts, just the same as we inspected the steering axle. And back here we have an axle seal instead of a hub oil seal. So we want to check and make sure that there are no loose or missing nuts or bolts, not cracked or damaged, and there's no leaking. Coming back here, we've got our splash guard. We want to make sure that the splash guard is covering the entire width of the tires and at least 6 inches off the ground, and covering a minimum of 50% of the tire down this way. Now on the tractor only, it requires some sort of reflectors or reflector tape on the back of the splash guards in case you're operating the vehicle without a trailer. Those are required. Then we're going to check the lights on the rear of the vehicle. We're going to check and make sure that they are not cracked or damaged. The lenses are in good condition. They're the proper color, no water condensation or anything built up inside there. They're securely mounted. We want to check the function of the lights, so left turn indicator, right turn indicator, four-way flashers, tail lights, and brake lights. Make sure they're all working properly. Okay, so next we're going to the coupling system. For the coupling system, we have our air lines and our electrical. So for the air hoses, we want to check and make sure that they're securely connected to the tractor. They're not cracked, damaged, or leaking. Also connected over here to the glad hands and to the trailer. There's no leaking or any damaged parts. We want to check the entire length of the hoses, making sure that they're not cracked or rubbing up against anything. They're not kinked or showing any kinds of excessive wear, and there are no leaks. And for the electrical connection, we want to make sure that this is all the way inserted inside here. We want to make sure that the cap is in place and has this little latch that helps hold that from coming out. And we're checking that on the trailer side as well. So same thing, that's fully inserted and connected properly. Want to check the entire length of the electrical lines here, making sure there's no cracks or damage to the insulation, there's no visible wires, and there's no illegal repairs such as electrical tape. If it's damaged, it needs to be completely replaced. We also want to make sure that this is not rubbing up against the catwalk or the frame or any of the parts inside here. All right. Next, with the coupling, I'm going to go to the fifth wheel skid plate. So the fifth wheel skid plate is here. I want to check and make sure that it is not bent, cracked, or damaged, or warped, and it's properly lubricated. I want to check the visible part of the apron that I can see, make sure that there's no cracks or damage, it's not warped or pitted or grooved or anything, and it is properly lubricated. I also want to make sure that there is no daylight gap between the fifth wheel skid plate and the apron. The fifth wheel skid plate is connected to the platform. This one's welded to it, and then also bolted to part of this going to the frame. I'm checking my pivot pin here, and this other safety pin that helps keep that from coming out. That allows the fifth wheel to pivot. The platform, we're checking to make sure that it is not cracked or damaged or bent. Also want to make sure that all the mounting bolts are in place and securely fastened and tight, and everything appears to be connected properly. Right here we have our release arm. So the release arm, we want to make sure that that's all the way in, indicating that it's in the locked position. And then it's connected to all these other little parts and springs and connectors and cotter keys and bars. Want to make sure that those are all in place, not cracked, damaged, bent, or excessive play inside there. Okay, next, looking in from the back side, we're looking inside the fifth wheel skid plate. We're going to check the kingpin. Want to make sure that it's connected to the apron properly. It's not bent, cracked, damaged, chipped, or worn too thin. And then we want to check the locking jaw is going around the kingpin, locking it into place. There's no gaps or anything. The locking jaw is not bent, cracked, or damaged, and not missing any hardware, and everything is properly lubricated inside there. All right. So next we've got the clearance and reflector lights on the front of the vehicle. We'll check and make sure that they're not cracked or damaged. They're in place and the proper color, which is amber. On the front, we want to check the bulkhead of the trailer. The whole front here, make sure that it's not bent, cracked, damaged, it's not bulging out. There's no holes and no missing or popped rivets. That all appears to be in good condition. Same thing with the entire side of the trailer. Looking for that excessive damage, bulging, or holes, or any kind of cracking. All right. We've got the reflective tape along both sides of the trailer and the back. It's properly affixed, it's clean and reflective, and we want to make sure that it's covering at least 50% of the side of the trailer, 100% of the back, and then 50% of the other side. So we'll go to the landing gear. For the landing gear here, we're going to check the landing gear legs, make sure that they're straight up and down, they're not side to side, front or back, not cracked or damaged or bent. We've got our supports and the cross members, making sure that they're all in place, securely fastened and connected, whether it's bolted or welded. Want to make sure that's securely fastened to the frame and again to the landing legs, preventing any kind of movement there. Want to check the landing pad, make sure that it's nice and flat, is securely connected and not bent or damaged, and then that it's all the way in the fully raised position. Want to check the hand crank, make sure that it extends and retracts the landing gear properly, and that it's in the stowed position. It's not cracked, damaged, or bent. No loose or missing nuts or bolts. All right, then we're going to check the clearance between the tractor and the trailer landing gear. So we want to make sure we have enough clearance between the frame and mud flaps of the landing gear and the truck frame and mud flaps, so that they do not hit when you're turning to the right or the left. Okay, we're checking the frame of the trailer, making sure that it's not bent, warped, cracked, or damaged. These rivets aren't sheared off, and everything appears to be nice and straight. Want to check the underside. We've got these cross members all the way down, making sure that they're not bent, cracked, or damaged. No loose or missing parts. And then we're checking the floor of the trailer, making sure that there's no holes or any damage there that could cause issues with the freight. Okay. Coming down the side, we have another turn indicator, four-way flasher, and marker light. We want to make sure that that's properly attached and clean, and no water condensation or anything, in a proper color, which is amber. Okay. Back here we've got our trailer axles. So these are have airbags, so this is a different suspension system. So we're going to check this lower frame portion here, making sure that it's not cracked or damaged or bent. We're also going to check the fifth wheel or the tandem axle slide. So we've got our release arm here. We want to make sure that that's in that locked position. It's down here hooked underneath there. If we wanted to, we could lift that up, and that would draw these pins in and slide the tandems forward or back. But these pins, we want to make sure that they're there in place, not cracked or damaged. There's one here in the front and one towards the back, and then two on the other side. So again, our release lever is connected properly, operating correctly, pins are in place. And we have our mount here for the suspension system. It's properly welded, not cracked or damaged or bent. We've got a arm here connected here, and then also connected to the axle. Want to make sure that that's in place, not cracked or damaged, securely fastened, no loose or missing nuts or bolts. And then on the other side of the axle here, you can look in, well, you can't really see it, it's back in there, is the airbag. So we're checking the airbag to make sure that it's not cracked, damaged, bulging, or leaking, no gashes in it. We want to check the airbag mounts on the top and the bottom, making sure that they're securely fastened to the frame and also to the axle, and not bent, cracked, or damaged, no loose or missing nuts or bolts. So that's the suspension. So the braking system, the air hoses, the brake chamber, the push rod, the slack adjuster, the drum, and the lining, we would inspect the same as we did up front. Then we've got the tires, the inflation, the condition, the minimum tread depth, also the bud spacing. That all we would inspect the same as we checked on the drive axles. Back here, we've got the rims, the lug nuts, and the hub oil seal. That would be the same as we inspected up there. And then coming back, we have our splash guards. We want to make sure that they are in place, not cracked or damaged, covering the entire width of the tires, and at least 50% of the tires on the way down. Should be at least 6 inches off the ground. On the back of the trailer, we're going to check all the lenses and reflectors. We're going to make sure that they're all in place, they're not cracked, damaged, or broken, securely mounted, no water or condensation inside them, and they're all the proper color. As far as functionality, we have our clearance lights on the top, our marker lights, turn indicators, four-way flashers, and brake lights on the back. Then we'll check the door. I want to check, it's a roll-up door, so we're checking all the hinges. So we've got all these hinge points through here, making sure that there are no loose or missing nuts or bolts, no cracks or damage to the door. We want to check and make sure that the door opens and closes properly and latches and locks so that it doesn't open accidentally on you. We have our reflective tape along the back covering 100% of that. We also have our wires here that connect to the springs up to help open and close the doors. Make sure those are in place. And then also want to check our pull strap to make sure that's connected properly so that we can close the door once it's opened. All right, so that's all there. This vehicle doesn't have any side doors, so we don't need to check those. And then just going through here, and that is everything on the entry-level driver training inspection.